Hello! Today we're gonna create a new 3D art style for our 2D strategy game. I'm super excited. Yesterday we created the dragons art style. Today, cool little robots in 3D. My dream is using normal maps to render them in the 2D engine to make them look more 3D. In case you don't know, normal maps are those weird colored things, and instead of showing the actual color, they just show in which direction the surface is facing at a certain position. So blue means directly up into the camera. Everything with a different color is some different direction. So maybe we can use those to make the game look cool. Let's see.
Okay, just getting started with Blender here. Just really vibing to the music, yeah, Trying to make a normal map shader with cycles and Blender. So Blender can't just export normal maps. But there's a cool node editor, Cycles node editor, that allows you to create your own shaders. So with some help from the internet, I tried to create a normal map shader a normal map material, more or less, that doesn't render any material colors, but just the normals of the object. And that actually turned out to be pretty damn hard. So I wasted a lot of time on just getting this to work, and as you can see, the normal map looks pretty weird now. I still try to get it into GameMaker. Here I'm starting to write the shader in GameMaker because GameMaker doesn't know what to do with a normal map. GameMaker is a 2D engine. Usually you don't have normal maps in 2D engines. That's why I have to write my own shader for that. But honestly, that's not that difficult. You just need to find the angle of the surface, and then the more the surface is facing the light direction, the brighter the color at this point is. Pretty simple. And the cool thing is that when you rotate the sprite in GameMaker, the sprite will change too, so the direction... I don't know how to explain this. You know, usually if I just render the colors of a sprite and import that sprite into GameMaker and I rotate it, the light looks off because suddenly the light is coming from a different direction, so that sucks. What I'm trying to do is creating a shader that always lights the sprites correctly no matter in which direction they rotated. Yeah, I'm still trying to figure out how to get the stupid normal map shader to work in Blender. And at this point I think I try to... yeah. I wasn't sure if the problem was in the GameMaker shader or if the problem was in the Blender shader I wrote. But it turned out that Blender exported the colors a bit wrong. Maybe I was using the wrong color space or something like that, but if I said, please render this with 50% red, it didn't render it with 50% red, but with 70 or something like that. So that's why my normal maps were way too bright, and I had to use some very weird color correction curves in Blender to get it to work correctly. So yeah, as you can, here I'm using the curve. And basically at the position where it's facing up, the red value needs to be exactly at half. So after a while I found a curve that works, and finally I have correct normal maps that I can use in GameMaker to create my shader. It's just a couple of lines in GameMaker, that wasn't really all that big of a deal. And yeah, here you can see it's slowly but surely starting to look alright. The lightning. But the robots I'm currently using look very weird. They are just some weird, strange cars and I realized that, so I decided to redo the entire thing. I wanted to create something that looks a bit more dangerous, and I decided on some sort of helicopter that I'm modeling here, adding quite a bit of detail. And this other weird submarine thingy can go to hell. So the cool thing is that I can also animate the sprites. I can animate the normal maps, just as I would do with a normal sprite. So I can also make the helicopter spin. That's what I'm doing right here, animating it, then exporting the animation and importing it into GameMaker, and voila! There we have a correctly lit helicopter in GameMaker. As you can see, I'm looking up stuff on the internet very often. It's very normal that you don't know everything yourself, especially if you do something like this. I have never really done something like this before, so I have to look things up quite frequently, how to do stuff. Here I'm trying to create the background. My idea was to create some sort of tile pattern that is lit exactly in the same way as the helicopters and stuff. But it honestly looked really weird and stupid, so I had to get rid of that, and I tried a couple different backgrounds. Really, it's always the backgrounds. The backgrounds are always the hardest part, because they have such a big impact on the look. I really struggle with the backgrounds the most. So here, what do I model here? I think I'm trying to find a better way to create this helicopter. Ah no, I'm creating the X. Ah, that's cool. So basically the things that spawn the helicopters, and I wanted to animate that too, so I used blend shapes for that to make the edges grow. I don't know the correct word. So yeah, now we have the X and the player helicopters. Pretty happy with that so far. Also the darkish background works kind of alright so far. Now I'm modeling the projectile. As you can see, all the sprites look pretty much the same. It's just this normal map look, and then I can choose one color, one material color. Maybe I'll make the shader more complicated at some point so that sprites can have multiple colors, but so far just one color is supported because there's no color information on the sprites. I can just have one color. But what I did is I randomized the color a little bit to give it a more varied look, makes it look more interesting. Here I'm starting to model the enemies. Another cool thing is that really I can have as much triangles and polygons as I want, because the sprite is just rendered in 2D, so it doesn't really matter how complicated my 3D models are. Obviously this is a pretty simple one, so this wouldn't really be a problem. This is really low poly. But if I wanted, I could use pretty much as many polygons as I want, because the sprites are pre-rendered. They don't need to be rendered in real time. Just the normal map shading needs to be done in real time. So here we get enemies in the game. I think I'm changing the health bar color to fit the enemies. Obviously play testing, trying to figure out if everything looks alright. And now I decided to make the enemies a bit more complicated, make the sprites a bit more complicated, because the player sprites are a lot more complicated, so I felt like they didn't really fit together, the enemies and the player sprites. Here I'm giving the enemy a bit of a jiggle to make it look even more interesting when they're moving, a bit like snails or something like that. Here's another experiment with the backgrounds, because I suck at choosing good backgrounds. This was a really stupid attempt, but what I try to do is animating the background in a cool way. Didn't work, so starting another attempt with this green, dark green background right here. And I'm using the same algorithm to animate that. Due to video compression, it will just look like a blurry green background later on, but it's actually animated, it's actually moving a bit, and looks kind of cool if you see it in-game, but in the video it looks a bit blurry. Here I'm creating the spawners, where the enemies spawn, enemy portals.
Let's have a look at the new art style. I will make a little playthrough. If it's good, hell yeah. So it's pretty minimalistic, a little more abstract than the last art style, which probably fits the game quite well, because minimalistic game, minimalistic art style, probably not a bad idea. Yeah. But dragons were cool too, so we shouldn't try to pick one yet, because there are 2 more to come. Let's just have a look and enjoy. The background was really hard. I had absolutely no idea what to do with the background. But I think it turned out okay. It's just some green scrizzle, which is moving a little bit. And what I really like are the eggs, blue thingies. They show you the progress in a pretty beautiful, nice way. And they have even more simplistic shapes, which makes me wonder, maybe I should have made all sprites a little more minimalistic. Here the helicopters, the player sprites, as well as the enemies are quite detailed, quite complicated. And the simplistic blue things are pretty beautiful, so maybe I should try the same thing again with even more simplistic shapes? Or do you like the sprites? What's your opinion? I also like the portals, they're kinda cool. Bang! Bang, bang, bang. Okay, here it gets a little bit more challenging. Let's spread them out really, really nicely. Bang. Spreading them. Bang. Okay. That was not all that difficult. Bang. Also keep in mind that none of these art styles are already finished. They are just art style prototypes, okay? I created this art style in 1 day. There's probably a lot you could improve on this. But before we start improving, we need to decide on something. So that's why I'm doing this. This level we can skip because I didn't create the graphics for those enemies. Denken die ernsthaft, die hätten eine Chance. Wie putzig. Started speaking German accidentally. That's how focused I am. And can skip this level too. And here's the hardest one, at least the hardest one with graphics. Let's see how this goes. But even the hardest level is easy for somebody like me, because I'm just way too good at this game. Et voila! We're gonna make more art styles very soon, so stay tuned. Thank you very much for watching. Have an amazing day, make the world your playground, and see you tomorrow. Peace.